In the heart of the ancient world, a civilization was born from stone and sea. The Greeks, a people of poets, philosophers, and warriors, looked to the waves not just for sustenance, but for salvation and signs from the divine. For them, the shimmering Aegean was not merely water. It was a realm, a temperamental kingdom ruled by a formidable and unpredictable god, Poseidon. He was the earthshaker, the bringer of storms, the master of all that moved beneath the surface. His favor could build an empire upon maritime trade, granting safe passage and bountiful harbors. But his wrath could shatter fleets against rocky shores, swallow entire cities with tidal waves, and condemn heroes to a decade of wandering. To understand the rise and fall of Athens, the odyssey of its greatest heroes, and the very soul of Hellenic culture, we must first understand the power they saw churning in the deep. This is the story of how the god of the sea forged the destiny of ancient Greece. In the beginning, there was only chaos. From this swirling, formless void, the first primordial deities emerged. There was Gaia, the earth, a foundation of immense potential, and Uranus, the sky, who covered her completely. Their union gave birth to a new and formidable race of beings, the Titans. These were not the refined, human-like gods who would one day reside on Mount Olympus. The Titans were raw, elemental forces, personifications of nature in its most untamed state. Their leader was Cronus, the youngest and most ambitious of their kind, who ruled the cosmos with an iron fist. His reign was defined by power, but also by a deep-seated fear. A prophecy foretold that he, like his own father, would be overthrown by his child. This premonition consumed him, twisting his rule into a grim cycle of paranoia. With his sister wife, Rhea, he sired a new generation of gods, but his terror drove him to an unthinkable act. One by one, as they were born, he consumed them, imprisoning them within himself to prevent the prophecy from coming to pass. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon all were denied their existence. The cosmos under Cronus was a place of stagnant power, held in check by a tyrant's dread. In this era, the sea itself was the domain of a different, older entity, Pontus, a primordial god born directly from Gaia. His realm was a mystery, a deep and formidable expanse that predated the rule of any single deity. It was a world of crushing pressure and ancient life, a reflection of the raw and unstructured power that defined the age. But the prophecy could not be averted forever. Rhea, heartbroken by the loss of her children, devised a plan to save her final son. This child, hidden away on the island of Crete, would be raised in secret, destined to challenge the old order. The foundations of the cosmos were about to be shaken by a war unlike any seen before, a conflict that would dethrone the Titans and elevate a new pantheon. The age of raw elements was coming to an end, and an age of divine order, born from rebellion, was about to begin. The child hidden from Cronus's fearful gaze was Zeus, and he grew into a god of immense power and charisma. When the time was right, he returned to confront his father, not with brute force alone, but with cunning. He tricked Cronus into consuming a potion that caused him to disgorge his swallowed children. Out they came, fully grown and burning with a desire for retribution: Hades, Hera, Demeter, Hestia, and the formidable Poseidon. This act of liberation was a declaration of war. The conflict that followed, the Titanomachy, was a cataclysmic struggle that raged for 10 years. It was not merely a battle. It was a war that reshaped the very fabric of existence. The younger gods, the Olympians, fought from Mount Olympus, while the Titans commanded their forces from Mount Othrys. Mountains were torn from their roots and hurled as projectiles. The sky screamed with thunder, and the earth groaned under the strain of their cosmic power struggle. In this war, Poseidon emerged as a key warrior. He, along with his brothers, descended into the depths of Tartarus to free the Cyclopes, monstrous smiths who had been imprisoned by Cronus. In gratitude, they armed the three brothers with incredible weapons. To Zeus, they gave the thunderbolt. To Hades, a helmet of invisibility. And to Poseidon, they forged the trident, a three-pronged spear that channeled his divine might. With this weapon, Poseidon could command the waters and shake the land itself. He was a force of pure destructive capability, his rage contributing significantly to the Olympians' cause. Ultimately, the combined strength of the Olympians and their allies proved too much for the old regime. The Titans were defeated, their dominion shattered. The most formidable among them were cast down into Tartarus, the deepest pit of the underworld, bound there for eternity. Victory was achieved, but now a new challenge arose. The cosmos, now theirs to command, had to be divided. The three victorious brothers, Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, stood as equals, ready to claim their prize. They agreed to draw lots, a game of chance to determine their eternal domains. The fate of the sky, the underworld, and the vast, untamed sea hung in the balance, resting on this single, momentous draw. The lots were cast. Zeus claimed the heavens, becoming king of the gods. Hades drew the shadowy underworld, ruler of the departed. And Poseidon, in a turn of fate that would define him forever, became the undisputed lord of the sea. His new kingdom was not a quiet realm. It was a world of immense size and constant motion, covering most of the known world. It was a source of life and a path for commerce, but also a place of sudden, violent tempers and profound mystery. From his magnificent golden palace at the bottom of the Aegean, Poseidon ruled over this sprawling domain. He was not alone in the depths. He took the sea nymph Amphitrite as his queen, and together they presided over a court teeming with life. Their son, Triton, served as his father's herald, his conch-shell trumpet able to calm or rouse the waves. Nereids, the spirits of the sea, danced in the currents, while dolphins, sacred to the god, played in his wake. Yet, Poseidon's control also extended to the more monstrous inhabitants of the deep, the great krakens and leviathans that haunted the imaginations of sailors. For the ancient Greeks, a seafaring people, Poseidon's temperament was a matter of daily concern. He embodied the ocean's duality. He was the protector of mariners, the one who could grant them safe passage and favorable winds. Fishermen would leave offerings on the shore, praying for a bountiful catch and a calm return. But he was also the god of storms, the divine source of the terrifying squalls that could appear without warning, splintering ships and claiming lives. His mood determined the fate of entire fleets. A single gesture of his trident could whip the placid surface into a maelstrom of towering waves and churning foam. This immense power, however, did not satisfy him. His dominion over 2/3 of the world's surface was absolute, but his ambition was boundless. Poseidon began to look towards the land, towards the cities of mortals whose worship he craved. His gaze fell upon the shores of Greece, where new centers of power were rising, and he decided that the devotion of the sea was not enough. He would make the land acknowledge his might as well, a decision that would inevitably place him in direct competition with his own divine family. Among the burgeoning city-states of Greece, one held particular promise. It was a city built upon a great rock, a center of learning, art, and philosophy. This city, not yet named, became the object of divine ambition. Two powerful Olympians laid claim to it, each desiring to be its patron deity. One was Poseidon, lord of the sea. The other was Athena, the goddess of wisdom and strategy, born from the mind of Zeus himself. To settle the dispute peacefully, a contest was arranged. On the high rocky hill of the Acropolis, the two gods would present a gift to the city's inhabitants and their king, Cecrops. The people, in turn, would choose which gift was superior, and thus select their patron. The other gods gathered to witness the monumental decision. Poseidon, confident in his magnificent power, went first. He struck the stone of the Acropolis with his mighty trident. With a thunderous crack, the rock split open, and from it burst forth a spring. Water, a precious resource, now flowed on the arid hilltop. But as the people rushed to taste it, they recoiled. It was salt water, a direct link to Poseidon's domain. The spring was a symbol of naval supremacy and the power of the sea, a promise of maritime might, but it could not quench their thirst or water their crops. Then it was Athena's turn. She approached the contest not with a display of raw force, but with a quiet, deliberate act of creation. She knelt and planted a small seed in the earth. Instantly, it grew into a magnificent olive tree, its branches heavy with fruit. She explained its virtues. The olives provided food, the oil could be used for lamps and cooking, and the wood could be used for building. It was a gift of peace, sustenance, and long-term prosperity. The choice was clear. The people of the city and their king, valuing wisdom and practical provision over untamed power, chose Athena's gift. In her honor, they named their city Athens. Poseidon did not accept his defeat with grace. His pride was deeply wounded, his offering rejected. In a fit of divine rage, he unleashed his fury upon the land. He cursed the city to be forever short of water and sent a massive flood to inundate the Thriasian plain, a devastating display of the power they had spurned. The contest was over, but it cemented a bitter rivalry between the sea and wisdom and served as a lasting testament to Poseidon's volatile nature. While Poseidon's trident commanded the waves, his power was not confined to the coast. The ancient Greeks knew him by another, more terrifying name, Enosychthon, the Earth-shaker. This title revealed a fundamental aspect of his being, one that could be felt hundreds of miles inland, in the heart of the mountains and the center of the most fortified cities. His domain was not just the sea, but the very foundations of the world. Ancient Greece is a land of seismic activity, a place where the ground can shift without warning. To its people, these sudden, violent tremors were not random geological events. They were direct expressions of Poseidon's mood. An earthquake that toppled temples, cracked open roads, and sent citizens fleeing in panic was understood as a sign of the sea god's displeasure. It was a terrifying reminder that no one was truly safe from his reach. His connection to the earth was profound. He was said to create new islands by striking the sea floor and could split mountains asunder with his trident. Myths abound of him using this power to punish the arrogant or to reshape the world to his liking. When the giant polyboats challenged the gods, Poseidon pursued him across the sea, broke off a piece of the island of Kos, and hurled it at him, trapping the giant for eternity. This earth-shaking power was also linked to one of his most sacred animals, the horse. The thundering of hooves across a plain was thought to mimic the rumble of an earthquake. Poseidon was credited with creating the first horse, striking the ground with his trident to bring the noble creature into being. He was the patron of horsemanship and chariot races, a terrestrial influence that seemed at odds with a sea god, but which perfectly complemented his role as a mover of the earth. This dual dominion over sea and land made Poseidon one of the most unpredictable and widely respected gods in the pantheon. While Zeus ruled from the sky above, Poseidon's power emanated from below, from the mysterious depths of the ocean and the unstable foundations of the earth. He was a creator of islands and a destroyer of cities, a patron of sailors, and a terror to all. For the ancient Greeks, he was the personification of nature's awesome and uncontrollable force, a divine being whose tremor could change the course of history in an instant. The great city of Troy was famed for its impenetrable walls, fortifications so grand They were said to be the work of gods. And they were. The myth tells us that Poseidon, god of the sea, and Apollo, god of music and light, built the magnificent ramparts for the city's founder, King Laomedon. They labored as mortals, raising stone upon stone, creating a bastion that could defy any army. But when their work was complete, Laomedon, in an act of supreme arrogance, refused to give them their promised reward. This betrayal was not merely a broken contract, it was a profound insult to the divine order. Apollo's anger would simmer, but Poseidon's was a force of nature. The Lord of the Sea unleashed a terrible curse upon the city he had helped to build. From the depths, he summoned a Cetus, a monstrous beast of the waves, to terrorize the Trojan coast and demand a human offering. While the hero Heracles would intervene to temporarily save the city, the stain of the king's broken oath remained. Poseidon's grudge against the royal house of Troy was now etched into the city's destiny. Generations later, when the Achaean fleets sailed to reclaim Helen, Poseidon's old anger flared anew. He chose his side without hesitation. Throughout the 10-year Trojan War, the Earthshaker made his presence known. He sent tempests to batter Trojan vessels and earthquakes to tremble the very foundations of the battlefield, sowing panic among the Trojan ranks. He did not remain a distant force. Disguising himself as the seer Calchas, he walked among the Achaean warriors, his voice a thunderous command, urging them to fight with renewed valor when their spirits faltered. His divine energy coursed through their veins, turning the tide of battle at critical moments. His partiality was so blatant that it drew the attention of Zeus himself, who commanded him to withdraw from the conflict. Yet, the sea god's influence lingered. In the war's final, brutal act, the Achaeans breached the city not by breaking the god-built walls, but by deceiving those within. The Trojan horse, a masterpiece of cunning, passed through the gates. The city fell in fire and ruin. The walls Poseidon had raised in service were now the silent witnesses to the downfall he had long desired. But for the victorious Greeks, a new chapter of divine wrath was about to begin. The sea that had carried them to victory was still Poseidon's domain, and he had not forgotten the offenses committed by the victors in their moment of triumph. Of all the Greek heroes who sacked Troy, none would feel the full, focused fury of Poseidon like Odysseus, the clever king of Ithaca. His crime was not pride or sacrilege during the war, but a desperate act of survival that became a personal affront to the sea god. Trapped in the cave of the Cyclops Polyphemus, a monstrous son of Poseidon, Odysseus used his sharp intellect to blind the creature and escape with his remaining men. As he sailed away, his own hubris took hold. He shouted his true name back to the shore, giving the wounded giant a target for his curse. Polyphemus prayed to his father, and Poseidon heard. The god's response was not a swift, merciful end. Instead, he condemned Odysseus to a decade of wandering, a prolonged ordeal designed to strip him of everything he held dear: his ships, his crew, his hope, and his identity. The Odyssey is not just a story of a man trying to get home. It is the chronicle of a 10-year storm, a personal battle between mortal ingenuity and divine, implacable rage. Poseidon became the story's great antagonist, the unseen hand guiding every misfortune. He was the tempest that shattered Odysseus's raft after he escaped the island of the nymph Calypso, leaving him clinging to wreckage for days. He was the disorienting current that pushed his fleet toward ever more dangerous shores, from the land of the Lotus Eaters to the island of the sorceress Circe. The sea, once a highway for Greek commerce and conquest, became Odysseus's personal prison. Every wave was a reminder of the god's anger. Every league sailed a testament to his suffering. The psychological toll was immense. Odysseus watched as his companions were lost one by one, victims of monsters, magical islands, and the relentless sea itself. He was forced to navigate between the whirlpool of Charybdis and the monster Scylla, a physical manifestation of the impossible choices he faced. He was a king with no kingdom, a captain with no crew, a man hunted across the known world. His journey home was also a journey inward, a stripping away of his pride until he was simply a survivor. Even after he finally reached Ithaca, his trial was not over. The prophecy of the seer Tiresias stated that to truly appease the god, Odysseus must make one final journey, walking inland with an oar on his shoulder, until he reached a place where people did not know the sea and mistook the oar for a farming tool. There, he was to plant it in the earth and make his peace, finally stepping beyond the reach of Poseidon's wrath. Poseidon's domain was the untamed sea, the violent earthquake, the wild horse. It is no surprise that his offspring, born of his unions with goddesses, nymphs, and mortals, often embodied this same primal, unpredictable energy. They were a lineage of heroes, monsters, and marvels, each leaving an indelible mark on the landscape of Greek myth. Perhaps the most celebrated was Theseus, the great hero and founding king of Athens. His parentage was famously ambiguous, claimed by both the mortal king Aegeus and the god Poseidon himself. This dual heritage perfectly captured the identity of Athens, a city of laws and philosophy, yet one whose power and destiny were inextricably tied to the sea. Theseus's greatest feat, navigating the sea to confront the Minotaur in Crete, was a hero's journey into the heart of a maritime empire, a tale of an Athenian champion claiming dominion over the waves. On the other end of the spectrum was the Cyclops Polyphemus, the embodiment of brutal, lawless nature. He was a shepherd, yet a monstrous one, living outside the customs of hospitality and respect that governed the civilized world. He represented the raw, dangerous power that Poseidon could unleash, a reminder of the perils that awaited sailors in uncharted lands. Yet not all of Poseidon's children were earthbound. From the tragic story of Medusa came one of the most wondrous creatures in all of mythology, Pegasus, the winged horse. Born from a moment of divine violence, Pegasus was a symbol of untamed beauty and inspiration, a creature that could bridge the realms of earth, sea, and sky. He was eventually tamed by the hero Bellerophon, another of Poseidon's reputed sons. Bellerophon rode Pegasus to defeat the monstrous chimera, but his ambition grew into hubris. He attempted to fly to Mount Olympus itself, an affront to the gods that saw him cast back down to earth, a mortal lesson in overreach. There was also Orion, the giant hunter of immense skill and stature. So great was his prowess that he boasted he could best any creature on earth. His story, which often connects him to the sea and its islands, ends with him being placed in the heavens as a constellation, a permanent fixture in the sky that sailors would use to navigate Poseidon's realm. From the civilizing hero to the savage giant, from the flying horse to the celestial hunter, the children of Poseidon were a reflection of the sea itself, a source of monstrous danger, heroic opportunity, and boundless wonder. Long before Athens ruled the waves, the Aegean Sea belonged to the Minoans. From their magnificent island of Crete, this sophisticated Bronze Age civilization built a powerful maritime empire based on trade and naval supremacy. Their palaces were not heavily fortified, a testament to their confidence that their fleet was their true wall. Their art was filled with images of the sea, dolphins, octopuses, and leaping bull dancers. They were, in every sense, the children of the sea, and their central myth is a cautionary tale about their relationship with its powerful god, Poseidon. The story centers on King Minos, who vied for the throne of Crete. To prove his divine right to rule, he prayed to Poseidon to send him a sign. The sea god obliged, causing a spectacular white bull to emerge from the waves. The understanding was clear. Minos was to sacrifice this perfect animal in the god's honor to seal their pact. But when Minos saw the bull, he was overcome by its beauty and his own greed. In an act of profound folly, he kept the divine bull for his own herds and sacrificed a lesser one in its place. He believed the god would not notice or would not care. He was wrong. Poseidon's retribution was not a tidal wave or an earthquake. It was a subtle, psychological, and deeply personal curse. He afflicted Minos' wife, Queen Pasiphae, with an unnatural and overwhelming desire for the white bull. The result of this cursed union was the Minotaur, a creature with the body of a man and the head of a bull. It was a living symbol of the king's broken promise, a monstrous secret at the heart of the glittering Minoan court. Ashamed and horrified, Minos commissioned his master artisan, Daedalus, to construct an elaborate labyrinth beneath the palace of Knossos to hide the creature away. But the secret could not be fully contained. The monster required sustenance, and the consequence of Minos' sin was outsourced to others. The subordinate city of Athens was forced to send a regular tribute of its finest youths and maidens into the maze, a terrible price for a king's disrespect to the god of the sea. The labyrinth, a marvel of engineering, became a monument to divine anger and royal shame, turning the island paradise into a place of recurring dread, waiting for a hero to cross the sea and confront the beast born from a broken vow. The poet Homer famously described the Aegean as the wine-dark sea, a phrase that perfectly captures the Greek relationship with the waters that surrounded them. It was a place of beauty and mystery, but also of immense danger and profound opportunity. As the age of myth gave way to the age of the city-state, the lessons of Poseidon's tales were not forgotten. They were translated into the high-stakes reality of politics, trade, and warfare. The survival and prosperity of any major Greek polis depended on its mastery of the sea. It was the highway for commerce, the source of food, and the battlefield upon which empires would be won and lost. This reality was never clearer than during the Persian Wars in the early 5th century BCE. When the massive invading army of King Xerxes threatened to overwhelm Greece, the Athenian statesman Themistocles persuaded his people to put their faith not in their city walls, but in their wooden walls, their fleet of trireme warships. At the pivotal Battle of Salamis, the smaller, more agile Greek fleet outmaneuvered the vast Persian navy in the narrow straits, securing a victory that saved their civilization. To the Greeks, this was more than a tactical triumph. It was as if Poseidon himself had rejected the foreign invaders from his domain. This victory propelled Athens into its golden age. The city organized the Delian League, a confederation of maritime states that soon evolved into an Athenian naval empire. Tribute flowed into Athens from across the Aegean, funding the construction of the magnificent Parthenon and other works that still define Western culture. Athens had become the new Crete, its power entirely dependent on its naval supremacy. This dominance inevitably led to conflict with the great land power of the Greek world, Sparta. The ensuing Peloponnesian War was a titanic struggle between the elephant and the whale. The Athenian strategy was to use its fleet to raid Spartan territory while remaining secure behind its long walls, which connected the city to its port of Piraeus. But a power born from the sea can also perish by it. A disastrous Athenian naval expedition to Sicily crippled their strength, and their final defeat at the Battle of Aegospotami broke their empire forever. Throughout this history, the Greeks never lost their reverence for the sea god. On the windswept tip of Cape Sunion, they built a breathtaking temple to Poseidon, its white columns a beacon for sailors. It stands today as a timeless monument, a testament to a people who understood that whether in myth or in history, the god of the wine-dark sea gives power, but can just as easily take it all away. The Aegean Sea is not a tranquil pond, it is a battlefield. For the ancient Greeks, to control the waves was to control destiny itself. And in the 5th century BCE, they forged a weapon that would turn the tide of history, the trireme. This was not merely a boat, it was a sleek, bronze-tipped spear, a testament to Athenian ingenuity and ambition. Powered by 170 rowers arranged in 3 tiers, the trireme was a marvel of naval engineering. Long, narrow, and built of lightweight wood, it sacrificed cargo space for speed and agility. It could accelerate with astonishing quickness, turn on a dime, and reach speeds that left heavier merchant ships and older warships in its wake. Its purpose was singular and direct, to ram and disable enemy vessels with the massive bronze battering ram mounted on its prow. The force of a trireme striking its target was devastating, capable of splintering hulls and sending a rival ship to the bottom in minutes. The men who powered this naval weapon were not slaves, but free citizens, often from the poorer classes. They were professional athletes of the sea, their bodies conditioned by years of relentless training. The rhythmic beat of the Keleustis, the rowing master, set the pace, turning 170 individuals into a single, synchronized engine of immense power. This human element was the trireme's greatest strength and its greatest vulnerability. The success of a fleet depended entirely on the endurance, skill, and courage of thousands of rowers. In 480 BCE, at the Battle of Salamis, this revolutionary weapon faced its ultimate test. The Athenian statesman Themistocles, understanding the power he wielded, lured the massive Persian fleet into the narrow straits. There, the Persians' numerical advantage was nullified. In the tight confines, the agility of the Greek triremes proved decisive. They outmaneuvered the cumbersome Persian ships, ramming and sinking them with brutal efficiency. The victory at Salamis was more than a military triumph. It was a civilizational turning point that secured the future of Greek independence. It cemented Athens' identity as a naval superpower, an empire built not on land, but on water. Every stroke of the oar, every victorious ramming, was seen as a tribute to Poseidon, the ultimate master of the sea. The trireme was their instrument, but they believed the gods' favor guided their hand. Yet, this formidable weapon required a safe haven, a network of ports and bases to sustain its dominance. The creation of a sea-borne empire demanded more than just a superior warship. It required the infrastructure to project power across the entire known world. A trireme was a fearsome weapon on the open sea, but without a port, it was a weapon without a hand to wield it. The genius of ancient Greece was not just in conquering the waves, but in taming the coastline. Harbors were the engines of their maritime empires, bustling hubs of commerce, military might, and cultural exchange. The port of Piraeus, connected to Athens by the famous Long Walls, was the jewel in this crown. Under the guidance of Themistocles, it was transformed into a fortified naval base, a secure home for the Athenian fleet. Its 3 natural basins were dredged and improved, with ship sheds built to protect the delicate hulls of the triremes from the elements. This was where the wealth of the empire flowed in, and from where Athenian power flowed out. The Greeks became masters of coastal engineering. At Corinth, they created the Diolkos, a remarkable paved trackway stretching across the isthmus. This 4-mile-long path allowed entire ships to be hauled overland, saving sailors the long and perilous journey around the Peloponnesian Peninsula. It was a strategic shortcut that made Corinth one of the wealthiest trading centers in the ancient world. But the Greek relationship with the sea was not just about control, it was about expansion. Driven by overpopulation and the search for new resources, city-states sent out expeditions to establish colonies across the Mediterranean and Black Seas. From Syracuse in Sicily to Massalia, modern-day Marseille, Greek culture, language, and political ideas were seeded across distant shores. Each new colony, or apoikia, was a self-governing city-state, a mirror of its mother city, yet independent. These colonies became vital nodes in a vast trading network that stretched from Spain to the Caucasus. They supplied the Greek mainland with grain, metals, and timber in exchange for wine, olive oil, and finished goods. This network was the lifeblood of their civilization, a maritime empire bound together not by a central authority, but by shared culture and the sea itself. And in the minds of the colonists, each successful voyage to a new land was a journey guided by Poseidon, who opened the paths across the water for them. Yet, these thriving centers of commerce and power were also places of deep reverence. On the most dramatic headlands overlooking the sea lanes, the Greeks erected magnificent structures, not for trade or defense, but for worship. Along the rugged coast of Attica, where the land meets the sea in a dramatic display of power, stands a monument of pure white marble. This is the Temple of Poseidon at Sunion. Perched atop a sheer cliff, its elegant Doric columns have greeted sailors for millennia, a final glimpse of home for those departing, and a welcome beacon for those returning. The choice of location was no accident. To build a temple here was a profound statement. It was an act of faith, placing a sacred structure at the mercy of the very elements the god controlled. It was also a landmark, a navigational aid visible for miles across the sea, reassuring mariners that they were approaching friendly shores. For a sailor weathering a storm, the sight of Sunion's columns catching the first rays of dawn would have been a moment of immense relief and gratitude. Inside the sanctuary, they would leave offerings to the god who had spared them, a portion of their profits from a successful trading venture, a small clay model of their ship, or even a discarded anchor, a symbol of a journey completed. The temple was a physical contract between mortals and the divine, a place to bargain for safety and give thanks for survival. This practice was repeated across the Greek world. At Isthmia, near Corinth, another major sanctuary to Poseidon stood at a strategic point commanding two seas. Here, the god was honored not just as a deity of the ocean, but as a force that could connect lands. The architecture of these temples speaks volumes about the Greek perception of their god. Unlike the enclosed sanctuaries of other deities, Poseidon's temples were often open, embracing the sky and the sea. The wind and the sound of the waves were part of the sacred experience. The structures themselves were feats of engineering and artistry, symbols of the wealth and power derived from maritime trade and naval victory. They were built with the spoils of war and the profits of commerce, a tangible reinvestment of the sea's bounty back into the worship of its master. These gleaming marble sanctuaries were more than just places of prayer. They were assertions of identity, territorial markers that declared a stretch of coast to be under the protection of a particular city and its patron god. But these silent stones were also the backdrop for vibrant, dynamic celebrations of the god's power, events that drew people from every corner of the Greek world. While temples offered a space for quiet contemplation, the Greeks also honored their gods with the spectacle of elite competition. At the Isthmus of Corinth, in a sanctuary dedicated to Poseidon, one of the four great Panhellenic festivals took place, the Isthmian Games. Held every 2 years, these games transformed the sacred precinct into a bustling hub of athletic prowess, political negotiation, and religious celebration. People from all over the Hellenic world put aside their rivalries, observing a sacred truce to travel and compete in safety. The games were a powerful expression of a shared Greek identity. The events reflected the dual nature of the god they honored. Poseidon was not only the ruler of the sea, but also the earth-shaker and the creator of the horse. Thus, the most prestigious competitions at Isthmia were the equestrian events. The thunder of hooves during the chariot races was said to echo the crashing of waves, a thrilling tribute to the god's untamed power. To win the four-horse chariot race was the ultimate status symbol, bringing immense glory, or kleos, to the wealthy patron who sponsored the team. Alongside the equestrian contests were the classic athletic events, foot races of varying lengths, the long jump, and combat sports like wrestling and boxing. These were celebrations of human strength, discipline, and perfection, offered up as a gift to the divine. The victor's prize was not gold or silver, but a simple wreath woven from wild celery, or, in later periods, from pine. This humble crown symbolized that the true reward was honor, a concept far more valuable than material wealth. The glory of an Isthmian victory would follow an athlete home, where they would be received as a hero, their name immortalized in poems and statues. The games were a spectacle of the highest order, a place where mortals could strive for a taste of divinity through physical excellence. They were a structured, formalized way for the great city-states and powerful individuals to pay homage to Poseidon. But for the countless anonymous sailors, fishermen, and merchants who faced the sea daily, their relationship with the god was far more immediate, personal, and steeped in a world of practical belief and profound apprehension. Beyond the grand temples and the cheering crowds of the games, the ancient Greek relationship with Poseidon was woven into the fabric of daily life. For the common person whose livelihood depended on the sea, the god was not a distant abstraction, but an immediate and powerful presence, a force to be appeased every single day. Before a ship's anchor was weighed, the captain would perform a libation, pouring a stream of unmixed wine into the waves as a direct offering to the god. It was a simple act, a prayer for safe passage and favorable winds, a recognition of who was truly in command. On board, sailors lived by a code of superstitions born from generations of experience. The appearance of dolphins playing in the ship's bow wave was considered a tremendously good omen, a sign that the god was pleased and the journey would be successful. Conversely, certain words were never to be uttered at sea, and certain actions were taboo, lest they bring down Poseidon's wrath in the form of a sudden storm. These were not idle beliefs. They were a psychological framework for managing the profound anxiety of life on the unpredictable ocean. Sacrifices were central to this relationship. While state-sponsored festivals might feature the grand sacrifice of a black bull, its color mirroring the dark depths of the sea, personal offerings were far more common. A fisherman might offer the first and best fish of his catch, returning a part of the sea's bounty to its master. A merchant who had survived a gale might commission a small stone plaque depicting the event and dedicate it at a coastal shrine. These acts created a reciprocal bond, a system of exchange with the divine. The sea was also a place of omens. A sudden change in the water's color, the unusual behavior of seabirds, or the mysterious glow of St. Elmo's fire on the masthead during a storm, all were interpreted as messages from the gods. This constant search for meaning gave sailors a sense of agency in a world where they were otherwise helpless against the power of nature. From the admiral of a fleet to the humble fisherman mending his nets, every Greek who ventured onto the water understood the fundamental truth of their world. The sea gave, and the sea took away. Their rituals, sacrifices, and superstitions were their dialogue with its master, a continuous effort to navigate the fine line between his favor and his fury, a testament to a civilization shaped, in its very soul, by the awesome power of Poseidon. In the winter of 373 BC, on the coast of the Gulf of Corinth, the prosperous city of Helice vanished. One moment, it was a thriving center of the Achaean League, home to a revered sanctuary of Poseidon Heliconios. The next, it was gone, swallowed by the sea in a single, terrifying night. Ancient writers described a cataclysm of immense proportions, massive columns of fire, a tremendous earthquake, and then a colossal wave that surged inland, erasing the city from the face of the earth. For the ancient Greeks, the culprit was clear. The citizens of Helice had offended the god they were meant to honor. They had refused to give a statue of Poseidon to Ionian colonists, an act of profound disrespect. The god's response was absolute. He was not just the ruler of the waves, he was Poseidon Inosikthon, the earthshaker. His anger could sunder the very ground beneath their feet. The story of Helice became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the consequences of divine displeasure. This was not an isolated belief. The entire Greek world, a civilization defined by its jagged coastlines and restless seas, lived in a state of constant negotiation with Poseidon's power. The Aegean Sea sits atop a nexus of tectonic plates, making earthquakes a common and devastating feature of life. But without the language of geology, the Greeks saw the hand of a god in every tremor. When a Spartan army was repelled from Potidaea by an unusually high tide, the historian Herodotus recorded that the Persians saw it as Poseidon's intervention, punishing the soldiers for desecrating his temple. The concept of a submerged utopian city, lost to the waves as punishment for its hubris, echoed through the ages. Plato's famous account of Atlantis, a mighty island empire that vanished into the sea in a day and a night, may well have been inspired by the very real memory of cities like Helice. These were not just myths, they were a way of processing incomprehensible trauma and rationalizing the terrifying unpredictability of the natural world. To the Greeks, the sea was not merely a body of water. It was a living, breathing entity with a will and a temper, capable of bestowing great fortune in trade and fishing, but also of unleashing unimaginable destruction. The ruins of Helice, rediscovered in the late 20th century beneath layers of coastal sediment, are a silent testament to the power the Greeks attributed to their sea god. The city's fate shows that for every temple built to appease him, there was the lingering fear of the day he might refuse their offerings and shake the foundations of their world. But how did they capture such a complex and fearsome deity in their stories and their art? How did they give a face to the awesome force that could build civilizations and just as easily reclaim them? To give form to the formless power of the ocean, Greek artists and poets created an image of unforgettable majesty. Poseidon emerges from myth and sculpture not as a monster, but as a god in the prime of his life, a figure of immense physical power and regal authority. He is almost always depicted as a mature, muscular man with a wild, flowing beard, his features stern and his gaze intense, as if scanning a distant horizon. In this, he is the equal of his brother, Zeus, a king in his own right, ruling his liquid domain from a palace of coral and gems deep beneath the waves. His chosen symbol, the trident, was more than a mere fishing spear. It was an extension of his will, a scepter of divine power. With one strike, he could summon storms, shatter rocks, and command the creatures of the deep. This is the image captured in the magnificent Artemision bronze, a masterpiece of classical sculpture. Whether it depicts Zeus with a thunderbolt or Poseidon with his trident, it perfectly embodies the Greek ideal of divine power, controlled, confident, and absolute. But Poseidon's dominion extended beyond the sea. He was the creator of the horse, striking the earth with his trident to bring forth the first magnificent steed. This association linked him to untamed natural energy, the thundering of hooves like the pounding of surf, and made him a patron of cavalry and chariot races. His myths are a tapestry of creation, conflict, and passion. His most famous contest was with Athena over the patronage of Athens. He offered the city a saltwater spring, a symbol of maritime power, while she offered the olive tree, a symbol of peace and prosperity. The Athenians chose Athena's gift, a story that reflects the city's dual identity, a naval power that valued wisdom and cultivation above brute force. In the Trojan War, he was a key player, siding with the Achaean Greeks and using his power to batter the walls of Troy and confound the Trojan heroes. His many romantic pursuits, often forceful and tempestuous, mirror the unpredictable and sometimes overwhelming nature of the sea itself. Through these stories and images, the Greeks explored their own relationship with the world. Poseidon was the embodiment of all that was wild and untamable, a force that could not be ignored. He was a god to be respected, feared, and honored, for the sea's favor was the key to their survival and prosperity. As the Greeks sailed out to colonize new lands, they carried these powerful images and stories with them, spreading the cult of the sea god across the Mediterranean. But they were sailing toward a new horizon, where a rising empire was waiting, an empire that would see their gods through a different lens. As Rome's legions marched across the Mediterranean, they conquered lands, but they were also captivated by the cultures they encountered. In Greece, they found a pantheon of gods so compelling that they saw reflections of their own. This process of cultural assimilation, known as interpretatio Romana, led to the merging of Greek and Roman deities. And so, the tempestuous Greek god of the sea, Poseidon, was mapped onto a more ancient and enigmatic Roman figure, Neptune. Originally, Neptune was a god of fresh water, of springs and rivers. His primary festival, the Neptunalia, was celebrated in the heat of late July, a time when Romans prayed for water to ward off drought. He was not, in his earliest form, a ruler of the vast, open ocean. But as Rome's power grew, so did its ambition. The Republic transformed into a naval superpower, and the Mediterranean Sea became its highway, its lifeline, and its backyard. They called it Mare Nostrum, our sea. For a state that now controlled the seas, a simple god of springs was no longer sufficient. They needed a deity who commanded the waves, and in Poseidon, they found the perfect model. Neptune absorbed Poseidon's iconography and mythology wholesale. He took up the trident, commanded the creatures of the deep, and inherited the rich tapestry of Greek myths. The contest with Athena for Athens became a contest with Minerva. The stories of Poseidon's adventures became Neptune's adventures. Yet, a subtle transformation occurred. While Poseidon was often depicted as wild, emotional, and unpredictable as the Aegean Sea itself, the Roman Neptune was frequently portrayed with a more stately, controlled dignity. He was less the embodiment of raw, chaotic nature, and more the divine patron of a well-managed maritime empire. He was the guarantor of safe passage for Roman fleets, the symbol of Rome's dominion over the waves. This shift reflects the fundamental difference between the Greek and Roman worldview. The Greeks saw themselves as living at the mercy of the sea, while the Romans saw themselves as its masters. Art from the Roman period often shows Neptune in a more serene, majestic pose, calmly riding a chariot pulled by hippocamps or seahorses. This was not the god who shattered cities in a fit of rage, but a dependable imperial deity overseeing his domain. The transformation was complete. Poseidon, the earthshaker, had been reshaped into Neptune, the ruler of our sea. The god had been adapted to serve the needs of a new world order, but this new order would itself be challenged by a force more powerful than any empire, a new faith that would question the very existence of the gods themselves. For over 1,000 years, the temples of Poseidon and Neptune had stood as pillars of the ancient world. Sailors made offerings before every voyage, and coastal cities held grand festivals in their honor. The god of the sea was an undeniable presence in daily life. But within the vast Roman Empire, a new belief system was taking root, one that spoke not of a pantheon of flawed, human-like gods, but of a single, omnipotent creator. The rise of Christianity marked the beginning of the end for the old ways. At first, the new faith was a minority belief, but its message spread with unstoppable momentum. The turning point came in the 4th century AD. With the conversion of Emperor Constantine, Christianity gained imperial favor. By 380 AD, the Edict of Thessalonica, issued by Emperor Theodosius I, established it as the official state religion. What followed was a profound cultural and spiritual revolution. The old gods were systematically dethroned. Imperial decrees ordered the closure of pagan temples. Sanctuaries that had been centers of worship for centuries fell silent. The great temple of Poseidon at Isthmia, home to the prestigious Isthmian Games, was eventually dismantled, its stones repurposed for fortifications. Statues of Neptune were toppled from their pedestals, seen now not as objects of reverence, but as idols of a false belief. The world was being re-enchanted under a new spiritual framework. The sea was no longer the personal domain of a capricious deity. It was now part of God's creation, governed by his divine will, not the whims of a trident-wielding Olympian. The fear of the ocean remained, but the methods of dealing with it changed. Prayers were now directed to the Christian God, or to saints who took on the role of protectors of seafarers. Saint Nicholas of Myra, for example, became a patron saint of sailors, his legends filled with miracles of calming storms and saving ships from ruin. In this way, some of the functions of the old sea god were absorbed and repurposed within a new context. The ancient rituals ceased, the sacrifices ended. The great processions to coastal shrines became a distant memory. The world had moved on, leaving the gods of Greece and Rome behind, relics of a superseded age. The temples crumbled into picturesque ruins, and the Lord of the Sea seemed to have retreated into the realm of legend. Had the Earthshaker finally been silenced, or did his power simply lie dormant, waiting to be rediscovered not as a god to be worshipped, but as a symbol that still speaks to the deepest parts of the human experience? The gods of Olympus no longer receive prayers. The temples of Neptune are now tourist attractions, their altars cold for centuries. Yet, the figure of the sea god has never truly left us. He has survived not as an object of worship, but as a powerful and enduring archetype, his trident a symbol recognized across the globe. His echo resonates in the most unexpected places. Look at the prow of a modern luxury car, the Maserati. Its emblem is the trident, a deliberate choice invoking the power, speed, and authority of the ancient god of the sea. It is a symbol of mastery over the elements, repurposed for a new age of technology and ambition. In literature and film, Poseidon and Neptune are constantly reborn. From the adventures of Percy Jackson, where the god is a central and complex character, to countless cinematic epics, their image is used to explore timeless themes: the conflict between fathers and sons, the struggle between civilization and untamed nature, and the awesome power of the natural world. This persistence speaks to a fundamental human need. The ancient Greeks created Poseidon to personify the immense, mysterious, and often terrifying power of the ocean. Today, we have science. We understand plate tectonics, ocean currents, and meteorology. We know that earthquakes are not caused by an angry god striking the earth. But does this knowledge completely erase the awe and primal fear the ocean inspires? When a tsunami devastates a coastline, or a hurricane gathers strength over the water, our modern understanding does little to diminish the feeling of helplessness in the face of nature's overwhelming force. In those moments, we are not so different from the ancient sailor praying for safe passage. Poseidon represents the parts of our world, and ourselves, that are beyond our complete control. He is the raw emotion, the deep subconscious, the untamable energy that can be both creative and destructive. We no longer build temples of marble, but we continue to build stories, create art, and design symbols that grapple with these same forces. The name of the god has changed, our understanding has evolved, but the fundamental relationship between humanity and the vast, powerful sea remains. The god may have retreated into myth, but his domain, the mighty ocean, is as present and powerful as ever. And in every crashing wave, in every tremor from the deep, and in the enduring mysteries of the abyss, we can still hear the faint, rumbling echo of the trident,